But, I really am just like you guys. Everybody's trying to touch me and grab my clothes and give me to kiss their baby or whatever it is. And you guys need to understand, it was just a short period of time ago that I sat in a meeting very similar to what you guys are sitting in. No translation? Don't worry, it'll come back. Which is Spanish. Spanish, no problema.
Today, we're diving into the shady underworld of MLMs and how they've prospered and continue to prey on vulnerable men and women. In 2017, a documentary about Herbalife came out. It's called Betting on Zero. IMDb rated it 7.2, and people were shocked by what they saw in this documentary. To make a long story short, Betting on Zero follows Bill Ackman, a hedge fund manager who was dead set on exposing the giant MLM Herbalife. What does a hedge fund manager do? A hedge fund manager is in charge of making investment decisions for a pool of capital, aka money, that's commonly provided by investors with a large net worth, hoping to gain more money off the stock market. Sounds so boring, right? Here's where it gets interesting. When you bet on the stock market, you're not just betting on companies that will earn you money. You can also bet on companies that will lose money. It's called short selling. The movie The Big Short explains this beautifully, but basically, if a hedge fund manager thinks a company isn't doing very well, he or she is going to use their investors' money to bet that that company's shares will drop in value. If it happens and their bet is right, they stand to make a lot of money. Just like Michael Burry did in 2008 when he shorted the housing market and earned a personal profit of $100 million and made his investors $700 million. Hashtag I'm poor. According to CNBC, the average hedge fund manager in the US makes $2.4 million annually after base salary and bonuses, but not Bill Ackman. Bill Ackman is so good at what he does, his net worth is $2.1 billion with a B. So feeling pretty confident, Bill Ackman said, hey, this Herbalife company is a scam. There's no way their stock will continue doing well. It's gotta fail.
And you got a business in a box that can make you a fortune.
He was certain this house of cards was going to come crashing down. So Bill Ackman shorted Herbalife for $1 billion. Now, if you've watched Betting on Zero, spoiler alert by the way, you know it didn't go well for Mr. Ackman, and he lost that $1 billion short. Why? Because Herbalife found the legal loopholes they needed and a wealthy investor to spite Bill Ackman to keep going. Herbalife is known for selling health supplements, shakes, and more. It's a multi-level marketing company where one orders inventory in hopes of selling it and becoming an Herbalife millionaire. But if you know anything about multi-level marketing, you know the real money isn't made through selling products. No, that's child's play. The big money comes through recruitment. I recruit you, you recruit your friend, she recruits her mom, brother, sister, dog, and so on. The thing is, according to a study on the Federal Trade Commission's website, less than 1% of people profit in MLM companies, and 99.4% of people lose money. That's a lot. If I gave you a bag of dog poop with one jelly bean and told you there's a 1% chance this bag isn't shit, would you go after that jelly bean? No. That sounds like a crap opportunity, pun intended. But if you've watched some of my other videos, you know from my time of being in the top 1% of the MLM industry, I speak from experience when I say MLM distributors don't use facts and logic to lure people in. They do it through none other than the influencer lifestyle.
I step out of the Ferrari, the Bentley, whatever, and people go, what does that guy do for a living? And I go, I'm an Herbalife independent distributor, and people are absolutely amazed that that's what I do. It's an incredible quality of life.
I make right now, I can't believe it myself, over $8,000 a day to over $3 million a year. It's unbelievable.
If I can do it, I've made a small fortune, actually a large fortune with the company. Anyone can, it's simple.
They sell you on hopes, dreams, and hype and emotional manipulation. And in my opinion, that is exactly what Herbalife did. But they didn't just do it to regular old US citizens. They did it to a large group of immigrants who came to the US hoping for their chance to build the American dream. And they were led to believe Herbalife was it.
Ya tengo un tiempo permaneciendo aquí en los Estados Unidos y siempre he trabajado con entusiasmo de hacer algo, pero este negocio llegué a perder la cantidad de $22,000.
Cada mes que uno estaba invirtiendo $1,600 o más, no estaba sacando lo que invertía, ni ganancias, nada.
At the urging of other Herbalife distributors, they opened storefronts in hopes to sell product, but unfortunately had to close them down due to no revenue. These people lost tens of thousands of dollars, and one man stepped in to defend and represent these people in a lawsuit against Herbalife. His name is Doug Brooks. Doug not only sued Herbalife on behalf of the innocent distributors who lost 5 figures or more, but he has went after MLM companies such as Omnitrition and Keith Raniere's Consumers Byline. Yes, that Keith Raniere from Nexium. In Betting on Zero, Doug explained to the Herbalife victims that when they signed up to become an Herbalife distributor in hopes of making it big, they had basically bought a lottery ticket for a lottery that was already over. While in court, Doug told the judge the average losses with Herbalife amount to around $8,000 or more per person. However, not only did Bill Ackman lose his short and over $1 billion, the settlement Herbalife got away with was nowhere near enough to make up the damages, as ex-distributors received about $10 each from the lawsuit. The USA has a long way to go in protecting consumers from these vicious companies, and awareness is key. Doug Brooks is a hero in the anti-MLM community, and today he's sharing his anti-MLM journey with us.
33 years of practicing law, I've never had clients put me in the middle of a prayer circle.
Amen.
It brought home to me that this is not just an abstract legal issue. This is something that affects people's lives. If I can do something to help them, that will make me feel like I'm doing something meaningful.
Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am so happy that Doug, the attorney from Betting on Zero, agreed to do this interview, specifically because not only did I think he played a huge role that impacted so many lives, but I consider him kind of like the OG anti-MLM person. Because he was anti-MLM long before YouTube was ever around. Before we begin today's interview, I need to tell you about our sponsor, which is Alpha Juice. Alpha Juice is proudly sponsoring this video, and I could not be more grateful to them for doing so. Something that's really amazed me about Alpha Juice, they shipped this to me from Florida to my home here in Missouri, and These juices are delicious. They're amazing. They have all different flavors, and they lasted me like 4 to 6 days, and they were so delicious. The juices that I would juice at home, I need to drink them like right away. I could maybe store them in my fridge, locked in a mason jar for like a few hours to drink later. But if I waited 24 hours, 72 hours to drink the juice that I made here at home, I have been so impressed with this company. They sent me a bunch of different flavors. I drank all of them. My husband was begging for some. He's actually gonna take this one after I'm done filming this, and I'm gonna have this one. He was like, can I have one of those juices right now? And I said, wait, hold up, I need to film, and then you can have one. Alpha juices are made to order, and within 36 hours of your order shipping out, the produce is picked, chopped, pressed, and frozen, arriving chilled on your doorstep. All their juices are unpasteurized and preservative-free. There are over 50 juices and specialty drinks to choose from, most of which are customizable with adaptogens including charcoal, chlorophyll, CBD isolate, and more. Drinking these raw cold-pressed juices are a great way to boost energy, kick a coffee habit if you want, or reach your health goals. When you join the Alpha Club Rewards program, you get $5 off every order, an 8-count juice for your birthday, and a free 8-count for every 10th order you place. Thank you again, Alpha Juice, and now let's get back to the video.
It's a business opportunity sales scam. It doesn't really matter what the products are. The products can be great, they can be wonderful, they can work. It's sort of irrelevant what the products do, because the key thing is you're selling a business opportunity, you're selling success, and that sort of got me hooked into this whole process. Over 25 years or so, I handled a number of class actions against MLM companies, including Herbalife, Omnitrition, Consumer Byline, which later became Nexium, that cult, and Malaluka, and a number of others. So I have a great deal of experience with this industry. I have taken hundreds of depositions of current and former MLM distributors, interviewed many more, and I know the ins and outs of what they do, and I've heard the same sales pitches over and over again. They're also difficult from a legal point of view, because the definition of what is a pyramid scheme is it's a deceptively easy concept, because it goes into retail sales and what are the significance of retail sales and how much of the stuff is really sold and does it support the commissions that are being paid. It takes a lot of work to get to the point where you can prove that. And there are also some legal obstacles that come up, like arbitration clauses. And now it's very, very common for MLM companies to put arbitration clauses and class action waiver clauses in their contracts. So when you sign up as a distributor, and of course you don't have a clue what you're signing. You're signing maybe a little 1-page or 2-page, agreement, but there's one clause in there that says this agreement incorporates by reference the rules and regulations of the company. Well, those rules and regulations can be over 100 pages long, and it turns out there are very sophisticated commercial contracts that, in the franchise world, before you buy a franchise, you get a disclosure statement that explains the terms of the contract, the costs that are involved, the financial results of the company, all sorts of information that you should have. The MLM industry is not subject to that rule. MLM, the multi-level marketing industry, has managed to exempt itself from any kind of pre-sale disclosure rule. It's part of the political power of the industry, is that they have gotten these, they lobbied for exemptions. So you're not entitled to any disclosure before you sign on the dotted line. And of course, one of the arguments that the industry makes is, well, it only costs $50 or $100 to become a distributor. And of course, as you know, that's very deceptive because, okay, yeah, you become a distributor for $50, but then they tell you, well, the real money is to become a supervisor, whatever the next level is, you know, like the lowest level. Of course, yeah, you can just be a distributor and theoretically you can make money selling the products, but that's very difficult to do. The real money, they always say, that's where you start recruiting people. And in order to earn those commissions, you have to qualify by buying enough inventory. And every MLM that I've ever looked at, there's always requirements to buy inventory or account for a certain level of inventory. And that's where you start spending the money. And you can spend, I mean, I have spoken with people who spent thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars on inventory. And even though they started off with $50 invested, before they, you know, after 6 months or 12 months into it, they may be tens of thousands of dollars into it. They may have maxed out their credit cards, taken out a second mortgage, hidden some of their financial problems from their spouses or friends. You know, it's really a miserable situation that we have.
So when you talk about inventory, so I don't know if you know much about my story. I was in the top 1% of 3 different companies, and for almost 6 years. I was one of the ones who was able to quit my job, do everything. And so I was very, very scared to speak out against all of this. But it was when the pandemic started that I saw so many of people just being preyed upon. And I was still under that mindset of that, like, oh, if I speak out against this, then I'm being negative. I was still under that toxic positivity that they put you under. And I felt so much shame for my part that I played in it for so many years. And so when I did come out, it was like, oh, wow, like so many people obviously come forward and they're like, I experienced this too. And then there were a lot of people who also came forward and people trying to recruit others in the comments of my video, or people saying, oh, well, that was your MLM. You know, not all MLMs are like that, which I know is not the case. Or, for example, I was in my last MLM that I was in, we had to buy inventory to sell it. Now, the first one I was in that I had the most success with, that I was in for 3.5 years, we didn't have to buy inventory. We purchased the product once a month. It was a health shake. And if they released a new workout program, whenever they did, we would buy that. But it wasn't something that we had to have inventory to sell. And I think that now, because pyramid schemes have been around since, you know, for a long time. And I feel that now they're getting more sophisticated, especially with the use of the internet and social media, because so many things are done privately and in these private groups. What would you say to the people who are like, oh, well, my company doesn't make you have to have inventory, so it's not like those predatory MLMs?
Well, what I'd say is how are you, is this a business opportunity? And how are you going to make your money? How are you, what are you doing to make money? If you're not buying products in order to sell them, what is it that you're doing? You know, how does the money flow? You know, you know, that's, and I want to hear them explain that because a lot of people who get involved in these things, they don't even understand how it's supposed to work. And if you just ask them, sometimes people realize in the course of trying to answer that question, they don't really understand it.
Don't you feel that's done by design to make it confusing?
Oh, absolutely. It's the whole thing is built on deception. Those compensation plans are fiendishly complicated. There's no way someone who has not had the experience of being in an MLM for maybe a few years could even understand the significance of the plan. but basically they all depend on recruiting, and they all depend on the recruits. Somehow the money has to flow from the recruits. I mean, I don't, they can call it different names, and they can tinker with the structure, but in the end, it's all about recruiting people who are paying money into the system. If I suppose it would be possible theoretically to set up an MLM that is based on retailing. I haven't seen one, and I've been doing this for close to 30 years. Maybe it's only because I'm a lawyer, I only get to see the bad ones, but I don't know. Each one, I mean, the names change, the terms change, but the basic structure is always the same. I think that the whole way this industry is allowed to basically function without effective regulation is a problem. Consumers are not being protected, and people are getting burned. And it sounds like you were one of the lucky ones. If you were in the 1%, but from the inside that most people were dropping out. Most people were losing money.
It's not pretty behind the 1%, and that's what people don't understand. They keep chasing this dream of trying to get there and make that type of money for financial freedom. And what they don't realize is that once you are in the 1%, it's still stressful, if not more stressful, because you're so much more heavily indoctrinated. And like you mentioned, the attrition rate. So basically you're building your wealth on a house of cards, and it's exhausting. And then I just remember, being at these private retreats with these people who were earning millions a year, which I never earned millions a year. And they were miserable. Everyone was so stressed out. I saw so many people constantly getting sick. It was just like, that was one of the big eye openers for me that really started my deprogramming and causing me to wake up, because I was like, wait a minute, what are we building here if everyone's so miserable? And when do we get to like rest and relax? Because you just don't. It's nonstop hustle. It's nonstop just being exhausted. And then I also got to this point where I was like, it really feels like I'm recruiting to fail. And you're just constantly told by your uplines or the CEOs that, well, the people who failed, they just didn't work hard enough. They didn't want it bad enough. Yeah. And the only reason I got to the 1%, and I can understand that now, is because I had a larger network than most people did. That's the only thing. That's the only reason people get to the top 1%. Not that they don't work hard, but there's also a lot of people who work hard and they lose a lot of money.
How was it that you ended up with a larger network? Did you just knew more people to begin with, or? I
was a hairstylist who, I didn't take new clients anymore. I was booked 6 months ahead. And then 6 months before joining the MLM, I was on a weight loss journey, and I created a Facebook page back in 2013. And I was like, I'm just going to create this page. I called it Josie Quits Cake, because I was binge eating cake every night. And I was going to share my weight loss journey with just random people, whoever. And I built thousands of followers from that. Right. So when I started 6 months later, I already had a close network in my community, and then I had a network online.
So you were an attractive candidate for recruitment, because whoever recruited you probably made a lot of money off of all of your networking and up the chain.
Yes, absolutely. I joined the person who was the number one person in the company, because I had a lot of people approach me about it, and I was just like, no. But they were like too in your face about it. And there's a lot of people who are very good marketers in these companies, and they know not to be pushy, but they know to show the lifestyle and to show all these things. And if you're in any type of vulnerable position, which I was at the time, I was deep in medical debt from an injury, and I was in so much pain at the end of every day of work. That's when they really prey on you. So I know that I've watched Betting on Zero. Tell us about like one of your biggest cases that succeeded, that you were able to like help take down an MLM or something that happened, and then talk to us about what happened with the Herbalife lawsuit.
Well, with Herbalife, I have to say, back in my most famous case, but certainly not my most successful case, because again, it's one of these companies that collapsed. It was a company called Omnitrition, and we got a great decision by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers California and some of the western states. A decision that caused a lot of stress in the multi-level marketing industry. But by the time we got back to the district court after we won the appeal, the company had basically collapsed, and we had to, they were not able to make a substantial settlement. But Omnitrition had been started by several former Herbalife distributors. And a few years later, we filed actually several class actions against Herbalife. And what we did is, instead of suing the whole company, we looked at individual lead generation systems within Herbalife. Because Herbalife, like Amway, like a number of the bigger MLMs, it isn't just one pyramid scheme, it's a whole sort of series of pyramid schemes, because each high-level distributor has their own network, and they also have, many of them have their own ways of recruiting, their own recruiting systems. And Amway really pioneered this idea that when you join Amway, you're not just joining this MLM company, you are also joining a motivational organization. So you're not only you're buying and supposedly selling Amway products, you're also buying books and tapes and recruitment methods and going to meetings that are organized by, not by the company, but by the high-level distributors. And it turns out, and there have been several books by former Amway people about this, that some of the high-level Amway people are making more money selling, recruitment methods and lead generation systems than they are from selling the Amway products. Now, Herbalife, at least parts of Herbalife, are like that too. There were these lead generation systems that were developed by different high-level people. One of them was called The Newest Way to Wealth. And that was our first Herbalife case. Like I said, instead of going after the whole company, we just sued the people who were responsible for the Newest Way to Wealth system. And boy, I think within weeks after we filed the case, Herbalife shut down the Newest Way to Wealth. And it took a few years of very difficult litigation, but they finally agreed to a settlement where they paid people who had been involved, lost money in that system. And then we also sued on behalf of several others. There was one lead generation system called Vertical Skip Marketing, and there was one called Financial Success Systems. And in each case, we were able to settle. But this is, again, these are groups within Herbalife. It wasn't the whole company.
But they were promoted by Herbalife?
There's a sort of relationship, and every MLM is like this. The relationship between the high-level people and the company itself is very important. The high-level people theoretically are independent distributors, but the company could not function without them. The company needs to have those high-level people, because they're the recruiting engine. Those are the people that are constantly bringing people in. The company sets up the marketing plan, the compensation plan. They provide the products. They provide, the official marketing material, and they have the big, extravaganzas where the whole company is involved. But they need those high-level people to run the recruitment engine. And what we found is that this is sort of unholy relationship between those two groups of people. They need each other, but the company, they don't really want to know what the high level people are doing, because there are earnings claims being made and products claims being made, and the company is saying, oh no, that's not us, we don't do that, and then if anyone ever calls them on it, they say, oh, we are shocked to find that our high level trusted distributor is saying these things. We will spank them and make sure that they don't do it again. I mean, that's the way the game is played, the sort of plausible deniability that the company has as to what its high-level distributors are doing.
And I feel like the companies get away with doing that because these distributors are 1099 contractors. So they don't even have employee protections to where the company gets in trouble. The company can just say, oh, they're just a contractor, we don't support that, what they did, that's not us.
Yep, they broke our rules and we're very sorry, and we'll make sure that they don't do it again. Maybe we'll fire them, or we'll suspend them, or we'll sanction them, but so they have this, it's all set up so if the regulator comes in, they know how to deal with it. So at any rate, so I had some experience with Herbalife, and then a few years later, a man named Bill Ackman, who was a hedge fund operator, and his hedge fund was Pershing Square. And I had no idea who he was. I never heard of him before, but he made a big presentation. I think this was in December of 2012. He made a big presentation about how the entire company of Herbalife was a pyramid scheme. And Herbalife was so big, Herbalife was actually a publicly traded company. They were a Wall Street company. So you could invest in Herbalife, you still can. They're traded on the stock market. And Ackman said they were a pyramid scheme, and he had sold $1 billion worth of Herbalife stock short. And I don't, short selling is maybe a complicated topic. I don't want to get into it. But basically, you can, if you believe that a company is going to be successful, you buy their stock and hopefully you watch it grow. If you believe a company is not going to be successful, you can borrow the stock from somebody else, sell it, and if the company stock goes down, you can then buy it back, return the shares, and you've made a lot of money. There's a problem if the stock continues to go up, you can lose a lot of money. So it's a very dangerous thing, and that's why these hedge fund guys, they're the cowboys of the investment world. You have to have a lot of guts to do something like that. Most of them, they're super bright people. They do a tremendous amount of research, and Ackman had done a tremendous amount of research. He put together a beautiful presentation which explained in gory detail how Herbalife functioned and how most of the people lost money at it. I mean, all the stuff that you know from your experience in MLM, he presented in this financially sophisticated way to Wall Street. And that began a huge battle because some other hedge funds, including Carl Icahn, who was a very famous financial wizard, he came in favor of Herbalife. So you had these two hedge fund guys battling out over this company. And the big issue is Herbalife a pyramid scheme? And the only government agency that's equipped to answer that question is the Federal Trade Commission. And the Federal Trade Commission finally, probably reluctantly, commences an investigation of Herbalife. And after several years of investigation, they conclude that Well, they don't call Herbalife, they don't come right out and say that Herbalife was a pyramid scheme, but they said everything but. I mean, if you read the Herbalife complaint, it looks like a pyramid scheme complaint. They just taken out the words pyramid scheme.
Why are they so scared to say it? That makes me so mad. Like, why are they, is it because they're lobbied by these MLMs? What is it?
What my theory is, and I don't know because I was not a party to this part of the action. I think when the Federal Trade Commission and Herbalife were negotiating, Herbalife, you know, when parties try to negotiate a settlement, you know, they come into it with things that they need and things that they want. And one of the things that Herbalife needed was that phrase pyramid scheme could not be called a pyramid scheme. They agreed to a settlement that was very onerous. There's never been anything like it in the MLM world. There's a 7-year monitoring program. They had to change the way that their compensation plan dealt with retail sales. They had to develop a system where that it was assured that commissions were only going to be paid if products were actually being retailed. And they had to pay for a third-party company to monitor their performance under this agreement. And that monitoring period is still going on because it was a 7-year period. So when a company agrees to have a third-party, you know, sort of sitting over their shoulder watching what they do, that's not a thing that you ever want your company to undergo. So it was there were serious allegations, and they had to pay $200 million in restitution to Herbalife distributors who had lost money. So it was a serious, substantial settlement. But before that happened, Ackman and the Pershing Square people had essentially gave up their fight. They said to Icahn, in essence, we give up. We're gonna, and they lost hundreds of millions of dollars closing out this short sale that they had undergone. So the FTC's action came too late to help them. But one of the things that happened after the Ackman did his presentation is that another class action, not by my firm, a different firm, filed a class action against Herbalife. And they basically, their complaint looks like it was taken right out of, well, both complaints that I had filed before and that material that Ackman put together. So they filed this complaint, and before the FTC took its action, they entered into a settlement with Herbalife. And sorry, I remember I was called by a reporter when we knew that there was going to be a settlement, but we didn't know what the amount was. And the reporter asked me, what did I think the amount of the settlement would be? And I'm not, you know, again, this is not my case. I'm just guessing based on what I know about the size of the class. And I thought, well, it's going to be at least $150 million because, you know, we're talking about 1.5 million distributors. At least a quarter of those were Herbalife supervisors, who are the people who are at the, you know, that's where you start making money recruiting. When the settlement was finally announced, the settlement was for $15 million. That works out to about $10 per class member. And you know, as you know, based on your experience with an MLM, that the losses that people suffer who have been in this or who have taken it seriously at any rate, they can be in the thousands of dollars. They can be in the tens of thousands of dollars. You know, maybe if you're lucky, you get out with, you know, just having lost a few $100s. But $10 a person was ridiculous.
That's a slap in the face.
Yeah. So I was hired by a group of Herbalife distributors, former Herbalife distributors, who wanted to object to this settlement. And most of these folks were Hispanics, because Herbalife had heavily gone into recruiting in the Hispanic community.
And that's one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I'm African American, but a lot of the time you always hear people say, why are all the people who join MLM so white? And there's not a lot of African Americans in the MLM community. There are the majority white people. Why do you feel that Herbalife went after immigrants and the Latin society?
It's really interesting because, you know, my cases, my class actions against Herbalife were back in the early 2000s. And it didn't occur to me at the time to do a demographic survey of the people in the class. You know, looking back on it, my impression is most of them were middle-class white people. I'd love to go back in time and you know, ask the right questions. But the class action that we're talking about, the Bostic case, the one that happened after Ackman's presentation, by that time, Herbalife had started recruiting heavily in the Hispanic market. And what had happened was, and again, the recruiting is done by the distributors. And so I don't know if Herbalife itself had some grand plan that they were going to do this. What happened was the Herbalife had expanded into Mexico, among other places. And the folks, the high-level Herbalife distributors in Mexico had figured out a way of recruiting that was working out very well for them. It was called nutrition clubs. And it was so successful that those folks started recruiting in the immigrant community in the US using the same method. So it sort of was a roundabout method where the whole recruitment plan had been developed in Mexico and then imported back here and in amongst the immigrant community in this country, and then it expanded there. So and you know, MLMs use a process called affinity marketing. You know, that's, you know, you are and sometimes people use the term affinity fraud, because when you recruit people who are in your community and using fraudulent techniques, you're in your community. You're recruiting people that know you and trust you. So you are, you know, their guard is let down, and you are, you know, you have an in, and so I think that what happens here is that, you know, maybe by random chance, you know, one person in an ethnic community gets recruited by a company, and they turn out to be a good recruiter themselves, and they start recruiting people that they know. And, you know, maybe, and I think you're right that because there are not a lot of African Americans who have been involved in MLM. There have been a few companies that have been successful in recruiting, and I think typically there, you know, someone, you know, there's been some you know, African American person who's gotten recruited and gotten involved and in one particular company. But and again, we don't have statistics. We don't, you know, we're working because the industry is very private and they keep this stuff to themselves. But that's, I think that's you know, part of the situation. You know, we're so racially segregated in this country that maybe in a way the African American community has been protected because, you know, the white people who are involved in these MLMs just don't know anyone, and you know, there's a lot of material for people. You know, to research and to figure this out, because this is a very understudied industry. I know a few economists and a few psychologists who look at it, but there's a lot of work that has to be done. And I think you raise a really interesting issue about the why there are certain ethnic groups that are or are not involved. I mean, there have been MLM groups that have been very successful in the Asian American communities, and there also have been ones that are very successful in Hispanic communities. In Massachusetts, there was this company called Telex Free that was very, they did a tremendous amount of recruiting in the Brazilian community. They were big in Brazil, and they became big in the Brazilian expatriate community in this country. But this concept of affinity fraud, I think we see all over. People who are in a church start recruiting the fellow parishioners in that church, or people who are in a school, and this one school teacher recruits their fellow school teachers. You see it happening over and over again, and part of it's the nature of the beast. You're taught to recruit people that people that are in your warm market. That. But to get back to the Herbalife thing, so I was hired by this group of people to object to the settlement, because a class action settlement, you can't just settle it, you have to get court approval. And the class members have the right to comment and even to object to a settlement that they think is unfair or inadequate. And it's very difficult to do that. But I was so bothered by this proposed settlement that I decided to go ahead and do that. And around that time, Ted Braun, who was the director of Betting on Zero, contacted me and said, could he film us when we went to the hearing where the judge was going to decide this issue. And I said, okay, sure. I've never done this before, but I think it's important to get the word out. And Ted Braun seemed like a very, very detail-oriented, very ethical person, and he is. He did a wonderful job with this movie, and he interviewed a lot of people. And he did a great job. He put together a great film. I was very proud to be a part of it. I lost the case, but and I think that it's a tough argument to make. But I was pleased to be a part of it.
What do you feel like? How did they get away with it in your terms?
As a lawyer, I mean, basically, the way class actions work, even though the judge is supposed to take an objective point of view and look at all the aspects of it and decide whether the settlement is fair and reasonable, judges are human beings, and class actions are big, complicated cases that take a lot of time. And if the parties come to the judge and say, hey, we've worked out a settlement, there's a natural inclination on the part of the judge to say, well, I think I'm going to approve this thing.
So were they talking about the $10 settlement to each person from before, or a new one?
Yeah, that's the settlement that got approved. That's where, I mean, we went into court. I went into court and argued this, and I said, this is a completely inadequate settlement. And not only is it an inadequate settlement, the notice program, the class notice, was inadequate because, contrary to my Herbalife cases, which involve probably, mostly middle-class white people, now we have a settlement that involving Hispanic, mostly many undocumented Hispanics who are, they are poor, they're not familiar with the legal system. They get a notice in the mail from the federal court. They don't think it's something good. They think, you know, the court is trouble, because the thing that they're most worried about is getting you know, getting pushed out of the country. So there's, you know, there's a lot of fear, and there's also a lot of you know, people are moving around a lot. You know, you know, we're talking about the people at the bottom of our society. They're, you know, they're living, you know, paycheck to paycheck at best. You know, trying to, you know, it's just, you know, and for Herbalife, you know, to take a step back, for an MLM company to be recruiting people like this and saying, this is the American dream, you're going to make a lot of money and be your own boss, when you know that the failure rate is you know, well over 90%. I mean, I think that's obscene. I mean, here are these people. They've got 2 jobs, 3 jobs. They're scraping together savings. They're probably sending money back home where the people are even poorer. And now they've scraped together enough money to get to the bottom of the Herbalife program. I just think that's a horrendous thing to be going on. And this is not how you know, our economy should be working. This is, you know, we're taking the last dollar from the people who can least afford it. You know, it's you know, it's one thing if you know, for a middle class person to you know, max out their credit cards, you know, you can recover from that. But for a poor person to put their last dollars into something like this, that's horrendous.
It is horrendous. And yeah, they're sending so much money back home. I mean, all of my black side lives in Kenya. And so I was sending some of my income to them, but I was nowhere near affected, obviously, by how those people were. And I think that I used to say that like Amway is the worst MLM company. They're all bad, but I used to say like Amway is the worst. But I feel like when you go after and you target marginalized groups, it makes you that much more evil. So I might be thinking Herbalife is the worst now. It's hard.
It depends on which one you're looking at, because they basically, they all follow the same format. I mean, Amway started in the 1950s. I think just about every MLM that you look at today, if they weren't a direct clone of Amway, they're an indirect clone. I mean, they're just this system of unlimited recruiting and you know, making money based on recruiting, based on rather than retail sales. It's been going on for a long time, and it started expanding in the 60s. There were a lot of effort by government agencies in the 70s to try to cut it down, and including a case against Amway. But Amway, one of the few cases that the FTC was not successful at going after an MLM company was its case against Amway back in the 1970s. So what happened was, every MLM company after that case came down in 1979. After 1979, every MLM company started copying what Amway was doing because it worked. It got the regulators off your neck.
And was that because of legal loopholes?
Yeah, that was what Amway's argument to the FTC, to the judge in that case was, well, most of our products are retailed because we have these rules that encourage retail selling. We have a rule that says you know, every distributor has to sell to at least 10 different customers in a month. And we have another rule that says you have to have sold 70% of your last month's order before you can make an order this month. And we have a rule that says if you leave the company the company has to buy back any unused product that you have in inventory. So Amway said these 3 rules make sure that products are actually being retailed. And of course, we all know now that that's nonsense. It's not what really happens. But Amway was able to persuade the judge that that was true. And so now, after that case, every MLM company in the world adopted essentially their versions of those Amway rules. They call them the Amway rules. And it's only as a result of this most recent Herbalife case that the FTC brought that the FTC finally said, no, the Amway rules are not, they're not a safe harbor. They are not a ticket to say you're not a pyramid scheme. We're not, so, I mean, the industry right now is sort of in a state of uncertainty because the FTC has said we're not going to treat the Amway rules as if they are your ticket to not be a pyramid scheme, but they really haven't made it that clear as to what you do have to do in order to be legitimate. So in the MLM world, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of stress over how should we structure ourselves so that we don't have the FTC trying to shut us down. And basically, the only thing that the industry has in its favor is that the FTC is just underfunded, it's understaffed, there's not enough people to look at every MLM company, and there's not enough people to go after the whole industry. If there were, I think you'd see a lot of companies shut down.
Interesting. I had no idea that they were under, I think I listened to, you were on the Dream podcast, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I listened to you on that, and I remember in something I listened to you on, you saying that they were understaffed, and that's why there's not more lawsuits coming about. I had no idea they were underfunded, though. I didn't know that. But the last MLM I was a part of was a cosmetics MLM, and we had to buy inventory every single month, and there was always a little checkbox that you had to check mark that said, I certify that I have sold 70% of what I'm buying. And you can't buy the product if you don't check that box. But you don't get paid if you don't buy the product. So it's complete BS. And it is an awful legal loophole that obviously worked for Amway. So like you said, they all think they can get away with it. But good, I'm glad that they're all worried and scared right now because they should be. And when we were talking earlier, we were talking about how there was a relationship between the top recruiters and the company. So I was never really noticed by the CEOs because I wasn't at the very tippy top. I was like in the 1%. I was like a 6-figure earner, but I wasn't earning the millions like my uplines were. Yeah. But I saw those relationships. And I think what some people don't realize about people who are in the top 1%, they talk with other people who are in the top 1% in other companies, especially when they go to a new company because they want to make sure that it's going to help them. And so that's why I'm able to say like, no, they're all the same because I've talked with so many people in these different companies and I've seen nightmares happen where the top people leave to go to another company and the MLM tries to sue them for leaving and saying like, you can't use your social media to promote anything else because you've already promoted us and you can't go because you're going to be taking all of, you're going to be poaching our distributors and taking them there. It gets so ugly. And I saw so much of this happening with multiple different companies, with multiple different top recruiters that I was just like, I don't want any part of this. This is all so insidious. So have you seen things like that happen?
Oh, absolutely. This is a huge issue because the worst thing, if you are an MLM company, the worst thing that can happen to you is to have one of your top level people leave and join another company and take their downline with them because suddenly this huge chunk of your sales disappears. So that's a nightmare scenario for an MLM company. So what they've done over the years is they put in the distributor agreement what's called a non-competition covenant. And remember I said, you know, when you sign those two-page agreements, you're actually signing something that's much more sophisticated. You know, you're signing basically like a 100-page agreement. It's like a full-blown franchise agreement. These are very sophisticated clauses that you usually only see in franchise or traditional distribution agreements, where you are agreeing that you will not compete with the company, that you won't steal their trade secrets. And they say, well, our trade secret is our list of distributors. So even though you're the one who's recruited these people, that list becomes company property. And if you use that list to recruit, once you know you leave the company, you are stealing their trade secrets. So there is a lot of litigation between MLM companies and their former high-level people, because this kind of thing happens a lot. People are dissatisfied for whatever reason, or they think they can make more money with a different company, and very often it's all just sort of distributor. You know, the high-level people really are running the show. You know, they're saying, well, we want to start up a new company where, you know, instead of, you know, commissions at 60%, the commissions are going to be 75% or whatever. You know, they're going to engineer things so that they will make more money at it. But there's a lot of litigation pending out there, not litigation on behalf of victims suing the company like the cases I brought, but cases between the high-level people and the companies, and there's a lot of money at stake, and it's vicious, nasty litigation. It
is, and that's what I saw. Like there was I always say I got to peek behind the curtain of the 1%, and that's when I was like, I can't do this. Like, I mean, it was so dirty and so corrupt, and I'm like, people look at these CEOs, people who are in the company, look at these CEOs as if they're God, and that they can do no wrong. And then when you peek behind a curtain and you see all this dirty, nasty, corrupt stuff happening, and then like suing ex-distributors, and it's just completely mind-blowing. And I want nothing to do with this. I remember you saying, I wrote some questions down, that in a recent interview you did with Alonda Carter, the recovering Hunbot, you said that victims of pyramid schemes are the least likely to report to the FTC. And why do you feel that is?
Well, I think there's probably a number of reasons, and this is one of these areas which needs to be studied, because you know the short answer is we don't really know. I have a couple of thoughts about it. One is, I think, and having spoken with many former MLM people, there's a lot of shame involved. You know, you tried to do this thing, you failed. One of the things that you're taught right from the beginning is they'll say to you, well, you know, this business is not for everyone. And, you know, so, you know, you might, you know, people fail if they don't try hard enough, or if they don't follow the plan, they're going to fail. So you're taught to think if you fail, it's your fault. You know, it's not that you failed because the recruitment engine is impossible for any but a tiny percentage of people to succeed at, because it is a pyramid. You know, there will be a very tiny group at the top that make money, but most of the people will never make that kind of money. But you're taught that it's your own fault. So there's shame. There's also fear, because if you recruited someone into it and you repeated the same lines that were told to you're part of the problem. You became not only a victim, but you became a perpetrator. Multi-level marketing is unlike almost any other kind of fraud in that the victims are also the perpetrators, because you're convinced that part of this business is to recruit other people into it. And you're taught how to recruit, and you're taught to say things that aren't true. You may not know that they're not true at the time, but you know that you're not being successful. You're not successful yet. You hope to be successful. You're excited about it. You believe in it, but you know that Cadillac is not, you don't own that yet, But so there's shame, there's fear, and this, I think a lot of people, they get involved in one of these things, they lost money, they realize that they screwed up, and they get out and they don't want to have anything more to do with it. That part of their life is over. I'm done with it. I never want to hear one of these things again. Don't talk to me. I'm going to go back to the real world. So I think, it'd be really interesting to do a survey of former MLM people and find out, what made you realize that you needed to get out. How did you get out? And what did you do when you get out? Did you were you afraid? Were you ashamed? Did you complain to the government? I would encourage, and I said this to Alonda, and I've said this to everyone for years, if you are a former MLM person and you lost money at it, the best thing that you can do to help other people not suffer the same thing you suffered is to go to the Federal Trade Commission and to go to your state attorney general and tell them your story. The Federal Trade Commission has a website. It's very easy to go there, and you fill out a form online, and just it doesn't have to be a legal complaint. It's just you just tell your story. How did you get recruited? How much money did you spend? How much money did you lose? And what happened after you got out? I mean, it doesn't have to be that complicated a thing. Tell your story, because the FTC needs to hear from people. I mean, they have they have to set their priorities. I mean, because they have a tremendously wide area that they have to cover. They have to cover privacy issues, and they have to cover all kinds of false advertising. MLM, pyramid schemes is just one piece of what they do. So in order to encourage them to take a long, serious look at the whole industry and not just individual companies, we need to get people to submit complaints. And like I say, it's not that difficult to do. The same thing with state AGs. Now, I don't know, not every state maybe has a website that's as easy to work with as the Federal Trade Commission, but most of them do. Most of them have ways that you can submit, and you can take the same thing you submitted to the FTC and submit it to your state attorney general, because they also have the jurisdiction and the responsibility to protect people from pyramid schemes.
So on that note, I did not report anything to the FTC when I left, mainly because, as I said earlier, when you're in an MLM and everything's built through social media now, all these team groups and all these private messages, and all the groups are private. When I left, I was blocked by so many people I thought were my friends, people who had been my mentors. I was shunned. I was a pariah, and they completely blocked me. When you block somebody on Facebook, all of your former messages that you had with that person, you can no longer see them. You don't have any access to the group where all this information was shared that is damaging. So do you feel that even just reporting your story, even though somebody might not have evidence to back it up, is helpful to them?
Absolutely. And I am not on social media, so I don't know how Facebook works. You know, I don't know if it's possible to copy stuff before you go, but there's still evidence. I mean, there's still, if you wrote checks to buy product or you got commission checks, or, you know, there's all sorts of evidence, and your story is evidence. I mean, that's, you know, you obviously you should be telling the truth, and that's that should be, you know, and the key thing is, it isn't just one story. It's 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 stories. I mean, that's once, you know, you see this happening over and over again, you know, that should not stand in the way of you going ahead. I mean, you know, maybe you're not going to remember all the details, but you know the basic truth of what happened to you. You know.
Okay, that's good. So I will encourage everyone to share their story, even if they don't have the screenshots or the, you know, the documents, you know, but like you said, they would still have the info from their checking account or whatever. So in closing, I wanted to ask you, there was something you mentioned in an interview about like a New York Times reporter who was like calling the FTC and they wouldn't. Can you share a little bit about that? Because when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, I'll send you the article, but it was Joe Nocera, who is a very prominent columnist at the New York Times. He actually called the Federal Trade Commission and asked them, well, how do I tell the difference between a pyramid scheme and a legitimate multi-level marketing company? And they wouldn't answer his question. And you know, and that's like the most simple, basic question that not just a New York Times reporter, but a consumer, a prospective recruit, you know, should be able to have answered for them. And the FTC would not do it. And I think it's a dramatic illustration of why the government, you know, as good as the folks at the FTC are super bright. They're very motivated. There are some great people there, but the effect of what they're doing is just not helping. It's allowing most of the, you know, there's at any given moment there's probably over 1,000 MLM companies, and the FTC just can't go after. They can't investigate every single one of these things. They could, if they were inclined, develop a regulation, as they did with the franchise industry, as they did with the business opportunity industry, which they exempted MLM from, but there is a disclosure rule that covers all other types of business opportunities, so that you get information before you start paying money. And that's one of the things that should happen here. But the FTC really needs to look at this whole industry. There's this organization called Truth in Advertising. It's a nonprofit that looks at all sorts of false advertising, but they've done a great job looking at MLM. And one time, a year or two ago, they looked at the MLM members of the Direct Selling Association. The Direct Selling Association is the lobbying group for the MLM industry. They call themselves Direct Selling, but really at this point, it's 97% MLM companies. And Truth in Advertising looked at every MLM. There are about 130 MLM members, and they looked at their advertising on the internet, and they found almost all of them were making false earnings claims, unsupported, deceptive earnings claims. And this isn't just one or two or three companies. This isn't just a few bad actors in a legitimate industry. This is essentially the whole industry doing, you know, making false and deceptive claims about the money that people can make. And that's just, you know, one thing that always comes up is whether these things are pyramid schemes or not. But there's another issue, which is forget about whether they're pyramid schemes or not. Is this a legitimate business opportunity? Is this really a business that you have a reasonable chance, not a guarantee, just a reasonable chance for success? And I am convinced that MLM simply is not a reasonable, it is not a legitimate business opportunity. Maybe they're not technically all pyramid schemes, but show me the numbers that indicate that, the average person who gets involved is going to make enough money to make it worth their while, to make more than a minimum wage, and most likely they're going to be losing money at this. But there's certainly, most of the participants aren't even making minimum wage at these businesses.
And yeah, absolutely. My last question for you, thank you so much for spending this time with us today, is there's so much pushback from people in the MLM community who say there's no difference from having your own franchise, as if you had a Subway franchise. There's no difference in doing that. Or they'll be like, well, you're making money on YouTube, you're a bad person. Or, like, oh, well, it's like having an Etsy shop, you're your own business owner, yada, yada, yada. And I like to say, having been in it and experienced so much horrible crap, including dealing with the IRS. Like, I didn't know that once I reached a certain tax bracket, I had to pay quarterly taxes. I had always been a 1099 as a hairstylist, so I always paid my taxes. I had no idea about quarterly taxes or anything. They don't tell you anything like that. They don't give you any insight whatsoever. I owed $11,500 to the IRS. I was slapped with these fines and penalties, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare. And so when I like to say that, yeah, sure, you're your own business owner as an MLM rep, in the sense that all the burden falls on you. And the company can get away scot-free from any type of burden because it falls on you as a 1099. So what would you say to the people who do say, like, oh no, it's the same thing as owning your own franchise or owning your own business? What would you say to that?
Well, having represented many franchisees and many different business, I represented, for instance, Burger King franchisees, General Nutrition Center franchisees, McDonald's franchisees. One of the things that you get as a franchise, you may not get a specific market area, a specific protected territory, but franchise companies are very careful about not selling too many franchises. In other words, there's a reason why you don't see a Burger King on every block in the city, because they would compete with each other. They would basically destroy each other, because a Burger King can always compete with a McDonald's. You can always say, well, flame broiled is better than McDonald's, and McDonald's can always say, well, we have a special sauce. I mean, you can always, we have, you can differentiate yourself, but you don't have to compete with another Burger King. I mean, the franchise systems, and there are disputes. And in fact, when I was representing franchisees, one of the categories, one of the types of disputes that we would handle would be cases where we felt that the company had built a store too close to another store. We call them cannibalization cases, because when the new store, maybe it was 3 miles away, but it's taking 10% of our business, and we said, that's not fair. But with MLM, you are not only do you have no protected market at all, and no limitation on the number of distributors, you're actually recruiting people who are selling the same thing that you're selling. And so if the whole thing is supposed to be based on retail sales, how is it possible to have a profitable retail sales business when there's no limit on the number of distributors? It's crazy. As a business proposition, it makes no sense. The only way you could possibly make money in that situation is by recruiting. You're never going to make money retailing. And the number of people who can make money recruiting is probably just 1%, and maybe even less than 1%, because the math just doesn't work out. But I would say, yeah, there's a huge difference between a franchise where you would get at least some kind of market protection, some limitation on the number of distributors who are selling the same thing that you're selling, versus MLM, where there's no limit on the number of people. And in fact, because everyone's recruiting in their affinity group, what you find is, you may have your own circle of friends, but you overlap with so once you've recruited a bunch of your friends, there's a limitation on the number of people that are available to still recruit and get into this. So from a business point of view, it's absolute insanity to just recruit competitors and just increase the number of competitors who are selling the same thing you are at the same price.
That's a very, very good point. Okay, just kidding. I have one more question that I just thought of that I asked somebody else before and they didn't have a great answer. They just didn't know. They were a licensed therapist. But you being a legal attorney. So why is it that these MLMs are so rampant here in the US? And they're able to get away with so much stuff, but then in other countries like Norway or Europe, there's a lot, like they're not running rampant there. What protections are we missing that we don't have here that these other countries have, that where they don't let their consumers and their citizens just be scammed by all these companies? Does it have something to do with capitalism, or I just don't understand, what is it?
That's a really good question. And I don't have a simple answer. I do know that, while the US is really the center of the MLM industry, MLM companies have expanded worldwide. And some of them have originated, a lot of the companies operating in Europe came from the US, but there are some companies that originated in Europe. So Europe is not immune. MLM is very big in Asia. And the holy grail for MLM companies is China. And even though China has a law that makes MLM illegal, nonetheless, you see a lot of MLM companies are operating in China. They say they've changed their systems, so they're not really MLM, but the reality is they're doing the same things. So MLM is all over the world. But I think you are right. Why is it, to ask the question, why is it that it's so big in the US? Why did it start here? And I think, we need the sociologists and the psychologists and the historians and the business folks to answer that question. I think there's, part of it is the entrepreneurial religion that we have here. Part of it is, we have this tradition of everyone, working for themselves or being their own boss. There are a lot of threads here that led to the development of this thing. We have, the old snake oil salesman who, in the 19th century, selling bottles of goop that didn't do anything, but if you can make a sales pitch, you can sell it. So I think there's a lot of things going on here, but one of the issues is we don't have a federal, a nationwide law or regulation that governs this industry. Like I said before, the industry has been very effective at lobbying to prevent effective regulation. The franchise industry, there is an FTC franchise rule that says, before you buy a franchise, you get this big disclosure statement that gives you information about the contract that you're signing and all the costs that you're going to be incurring and all that. Business opportunities, non-franchise business opportunities have a rule that says, you have to get pre-sale disclosures, but MLM is exempt from all that. And purely politics. There's no logical reason why MLM is the only business opportunity that is not subject to a pre-sale disclosure rule. It's purely politics, and it's very effective lobbying by the Direct Selling Association. So we have a legal environment that we want to, in this country, it is capitalism. We do want to encourage entrepreneurs and businessmen, but one of the consequences of that is that people who take advantage of the system have an opportunity to do that and to commit fraud, and it takes a while for the government to wake up and shut them down. And again, if we're with a politically well-entrenched industry, it can be difficult to get anything done. So.
Speaking of politics, what were your thoughts when Betsy DeVos became Secretary of Education, knowing her husband is the CEO of the parent company of Amway?
Yeah, we have an administration, and it isn't just Betsy DeVos. Donald Trump was a spokesperson for an MLM called ACN. He also had his own network marketing. He called it the Trump Network. It had another name, and then he got involved, and they changed the name. Of course, the whole thing went belly up, like most of his other businesses. But he's an MLMer. Ben Carlson, who's Secretary of Health and Human Services, he was a spokesperson for I think it was for Manatech, another MLM. So we have an administration that is it's a pyramid scheme administration. I mean, I can't say enough bad things about our leadership in this country, but one of them is this this background in scams. And so I for a number of reasons, I hope that there's a change in administration at the next election, and I hope that the next administration does a better job. But with folks like Elizabeth DeVos and Donald Trump in charge, the MLM industry is probably very, very happy that they are there.
I didn't know Trump had been a part of several MLMs. I think it was 3 total until later on. But I think that those types of people were the scammers who got in and were like, okay, we're going to make as much money as we can and then get out. Because I didn't know people had that mindset when it came to MLM companies until I started creating anti-MLM videos. And I would have a few people commented in the comments, and they said, everyone knows you just joined an MLM money to make money, ride that wave, and then get out. And I was like, I had no idea anybody thought like that. Like, a lot of us became victims and we thought we were like helping people, but there are those people, you're right, who just get into scam and then get out.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so scary.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for being here and sharing everything that you did. It's been incredible, and you're doing a great fight. Thank you for all the work that you've done all these years.
Well, thank you for your work. I think what you do is extremely important. There's been this explosion of anti-MLM folks on YouTube and doing podcasts. And because the government has not been protecting people, it falls to you folks to really do that work and to get the word out. So I think what you do is really important, and I thank you for that.